Hello Aqua friends, welcome to my channel. My name is Nicole and today I have two very unique Christmas ornaments to share with you. And welcome to my holiday cheer series. I will be posting every week some videos for Christmas cards or just winter inspired paintings. And I hope you do join me and paint along. So first off, I have a stencil of a Christmas bulb. Obviously you don't need this stencil. You can do your own design, but these were on Amazon. There's all kinds of Christmas stencils I have that are just kind of fun to incorporate with my watercolors. Another thing that I use for these paintings is a sponge dauber, a round sponge dauber, which unfortunately Amazon does not sell ones that I like, so I get mine from my local craft store like Michael's or Hobby Lobby. We are going to start off by wetting our paper really well. And I'm mixing up a whole bunch of colors here of almost looks like a confetti background, and it's going to be soft and out of focus, but basically I'm going to use my round sponge daubers to do Christmas lights in the background really roughly, and like I said, they're going to be out of focus, and it really reminds me of confetti and all these happy colors. So I have some bright greens and reds and oranges and yellows. Now, if you don't have a sponge dauber, you could just use your regular brush and use a round brush and just dab a small dot on your paper. Re-wetting my paper here because after preparing my paints, I wanted to make sure my paper stays wet long enough to get all these pretty dots in. So as you can see, I'm just dabbing my paper and it's producing all these lovely out of focus lights. So I'm varying up my colors and I'm going to add all these colors to different areas in the background here. So once you're happy with the amount of dots that you have in the background, I'm going to go ahead and start on the tree branches. I do want a combination of soft out of focus, but I'm also going to go back in there while my paper is drying to get some more definition layers on top of these branches. But starting off and taking advantage that my paper is still wet. Okay, so for this, I'm using a calligraphy brush now. They hold a lot of paint and they have a very fine tip. I really love calligraphy brushes. So notice I'm going a little darker here. I'm always starting with my lightest colors, my lightest greens, and then I'm going to the darker greens. Now here I decided that my paper was too wet in that area. I want to dry it a little bit more because I do want some defined brush strokes at this point. And for the really wispy parts of the pine needles, I switched to a script liner brush. Once you're happy with the amount of pine needles you have on there, you're going to let that whole thing dry. And for my second layer, it's about the red bulb. So I'm going to start off working wet on wet, and this is quinacridone red that I'm using mixed with some permanent rose. So taking advantage of gravity, I'm just going to tilt my paper. Now while it's wet, I do want to have a little bit of depth in this bulb and have a three-dimensional look by darkening up the sides. And so it's going to go from a darker to a lighter color and gives it some dimension. So it dried quite nicely. Now I'm showing you that I am using a white pen in order to get the lines for the design on my bulb so that I can see them better. So once you have all your lines in place, I'm going to go ahead with my adhesive for my gold foil. Now let's talk about other options. If you don't have gold foil, you could use gold ink and just paint it on there. You could also use gold sparkly pens, acrylic pens. So there's lots of options. I do like the little bit of three-dimension that you get using this type of glue. It does have a raised surface, and it's really, really pretty for these holiday cards. In order to make my lines, I'm using a ruling pen. And the ruling pen works quite well. You have a lot of control, and it's perfect for using with gold foil. Now I do want some thicker bands of the gold, and I'm using one of my detail brushes. Now if you pre-wet the bristles of your brush with some soap, either hand soap or I have a soap that's specific for brushes. This does save your bristles, and it hasn't wrecked my brush yet. So that's a tip for you. And then when you're done with the glue, you would want to, of course, rinse out your brush, soap it up again, and just get rid of the adhesive. So you do have to let that adhesive dry for a good half an hour, and then you'll be able to put your gold foil on. So I'm just taking a sheet and I'm laying it right down. You want to give it a good rub. And then start picking up the excess foil. Using a stiff brush helps. And voila, we have this so far for our card, which is quite pretty. You can further enhance your card by outlining the side or using a scalloped edge. So again, I'm using the glue, and I decided adding a little border and adding some more gold to this lovely card would increase that festive feeling. So again, you're going to have to let your adhesive dry before you put in the gold foil. So go grab yourself a cup of hot chocolate or tea and wait a half an hour. Coming back to it, my half hour is up, and I'm adding the gold foil to the edges. So I'm just dabbing down on my paintbrush so that I'm really pushing down and getting that into the glue bits. So tap, 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 and you're going to work around the edges. adding pieces of foil as you go. So this part's actually kind of fun. It's really fun to see it all come together. And now just using your brush to get off all the excess gold foil. And notice that does add a lot to the card. Back in the bucket where I could reuse all those later. So that is the card. Hope you liked the first one. Now we're on to the second one. So for this blue one, I decided to have a soft background, and I kind of wanted like maybe a little bit dark in the background, not paper white. So instead of using gray, I'm going to make my own gray by using cobalt blue and burnt sienna. This makes a really lovely gray, but I kind of wanted it to also mix on the paper by itself. And my paper is really, really nice and wet. And so I'm dabbing on, as you can see, a whole bunch of color here. And now I'm just going to rotate my paper and just watch watercolor do its magic. And there is no way that I could take a paintbrush and make that as pretty as it turned out. While it's drying is the time when you can take a sponge dauber and pull up some of this paint so that we have the lights in the background. Now, if you don't have a round sponge dauber, you can wait for your whole painting to dry and then take a stencil and lift up the paint using a stencil in one of your paintbrushes, just a damp brush, and rubbing it over the circle stencil will also make these lights. So that's a second option for you. Of course, you could also just use your paintbrush in a circular fashion to make some lights as well. So I keep going over it a few times and while it's drying, because I could lift even more paint a little bit, and especially by dabbing it off on your piece of paper towel. Now you're going to let that whole thing dry before we do the bulb. So once it's dry, I drew the bulb. You could just draw a circle, like I said, do your own design, but I happen to have these cute little stencils, and so I just used those. I'm using the same blue so that we have a very cohesive painting here, and I'm using the same blue. So this is cobalt blue, and I'm just going to cover the whole thing here with the blue. Again, making it a little bit darker around the edges for a little bit of depth. Now I'm taking my calligraphy brush with the lightest green and repeating what we did in step one, adding a couple of branches. Now I'm going to dry the lightest green that I have here before I add on my darker greens, because I want some more defined brush strokes. Using my script liner brush and some sap green, putting in those pine needles. All right, so with my white pen, I'm adding the lines of where I want my design. Especially with this blue bulb, it's a lot darker than the red bulb, so I definitely need a guide here that I can see in order to add the glue and the silver leaf. So for this bulb, I love the blue palette, the wintry blues, and I thought silver would go well. And like I said, if you do not have silver leaf in the adhesive, you could use silver ink, you could use a silver sparkly pen, or even they do have some silver acrylic pens that work well. So using my adhesive, I'm tracing all my lines. And once I'm done with that, I am going to let that whole thing dry for half an hour. Okay, now that it's dry, I'm taking my sheet of silver, give it a good rub so it gets in all those nooks and crannies, and remove the excess. This stuff lasts a really long time. You'll have a lot of excess that you could use on other projects. So do keep it in a bucket or container of some sort. Using my stiff brush to get the excess silver leaf off of my decoration. Now for the edges of this card, I decided to just kind of do meandering lines, and I was trying to go for just like a lacy pattern. So you'll notice I have the masking tape on the inside, and I made sure that the masking tape was not too sticky so that I don't lift up any of the silver leaf or painting. But I wanted to protect the painting from putting the glue along the edges, and so that's why you're seeing the masking tape on the inside of the painting. And that was just for the application part of the silver. So once I'm done with applying the silver leaf and scraping it off with my stiff brush, I'll be able to take off that masking tape. So you kind of see how it's just like this little lacy pattern. And let's remove the tape, which removes quite easily because, like I said, I did make sure that it wasn't too sticky. All right, so there is the other version of the Christmas bulb. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Hope you guys give it a try. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Thanks for watching.